Hello, everyone. This is Julie Thiel with Thiel Talent Strategy, and you're at the Leadership and Retention Lab. And this is my every other week going live to talk about all things leadership and retention. And today happens to be a deep dive on leadership. And as you may have seen with this announcement, it's the kind of official launch of the Prepared Mind Project, which you'll see I have my first guests here. So yay, the technology worked. We're really excited about that. But I'm really excited to be with you here today and to introducing the project with my two business partners, Jim Samuelson and Bill Welter. And just to give you a little bit of, make sure you're in the right place. The title of this event was "The Future Belongs to the Prepared. Are you ready?" And we believe, as the Prepared Mind Project, that the future belongs to those who are prepared to think differently. And we are going to explore those topics today. So the things that you can expect that you're going to get out of today is we're going to talk a little bit about what the Prepared Mind Project is and kind of where it came from and why it's relevant today. We're going to start with that. We're going to move then into talking about the future of learning and leadership and kind of some of our insights there and a little bit of how we're starting to apply that in a management context. And then also going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence and adaptability, because that's also a critical piece to being a leader now and in the future. And then we'll kind of wrap it all up and talk to you a little bit about what you can expect from the three of us as we go forward with the Prepared Mind Project. So given that, I want to introduce both Jim and Bill. And this is super fun for me because one of the fun things about building a business is I get to network and talk to all my friends. And Bill, I've known for years. Jim, I've known for years. And as I was reconnecting and talking a little bit about my business, I just kind of had this moment of, I think Bill and Jim would really enjoy a conversation. As you'll hear, they're both deep thinkers, have a lot of unique insights on topics around all things technology and leadership. So I introduced them. They had some great conversations and then reached out to me and said, hey, let's do something together. And we think we have an idea for a business here that would be really meaningful and helpful given the world that we're in with AI and everything else that's changing so quickly. So I'm going to hand it over for each of you to say hello. So Jim, do you want to go first? We'll have you just say hello and introduce yourself, and then Bill, you'll be next.
Hello, everybody. Jim Samuelson. I'm an engineering fellow at Pegasystems, but also a key part of the Prepared Mind Project. I've got decades of experience building innovative solutions and being accused of thinking upside down, which you'll hear more about.
Absolutely. A little teaser for what we're going to talk about today. And Bill, turn it over to you.
So really quickly, I'm the OOG in the room, the official old guy. I spent time in the military. I spent time in engineering. I spent a whole bunch of time in consulting and education. And I've written a few books, and that's me. And that would be my first book. It's a good one. And as one of my sons told me, Dad, you're way too old to retire. Keep on going. So there you go.
Absolutely. No, we have had so much fun putting our heads together and talking about the future of leadership. And it really is based on Bill's book, The Prepared Mind of Leaders. And so that is really the core foundation. But it's something that is really timeless. And that's why we're so excited to be kind of updating and talking about it in a little different context than when you originally wrote the book. And today, what we're going to be talking about, the kind of the theme of all of this is answering this question. How do we prepare leaders for what's next when the pace of change keeps accelerating? Because it's accelerating really, really fast. And so with that, I'm going to start off with Bill to talk, talking a little bit of where the prepared mind of a leader, where did that idea come from? Give us a little bit of an overview of the genesis of that book, that idea, and what the prepared mind really is.
So here's my story. A bunch of years ago in my consulting life, I was sitting in a conference room one day, and I looked across the table and I said, She's got an MBA from Stanford. He's got an MBA from Harvard. I know they're smarter than I am. Why am I here? And then that kind of hung in my head for a while. And then I came across the quote from Louis Pasteur, the French microbiologist, who was at one point in time accused of being lucky. And he says, I was lucky, but I was ready for it. And when you take the French to the English, it turns out to be chance favors a prepared mind. That led me on to, so what are the skills of a prepared mind? It's not a question of knowledge, because we have a lot of smart people, and now we've got chat and everybody else who can tell us things. The question is, how do you use it? And in the course of a few years, I ended up coming across 8 things that I thought differentiated people who were prepared versus who were not prepared. Now, you're going to hear more about this thing in subsequent times, but so I'll give it to you real quick. Observe, imagine, reason, reflect, challenge, decide, learn, and enable. 8 things that are intellectually obvious. I've done literally hundreds of workshops in the past 20 years. And at the end of a workshop, I'll say, obvious, huh? And people will say, yeah. And then my question is, which ones aren't used here?
Sure. Okay. Good question.
And then you get some consistent answers, whether it was here or Europe or China. I've got the secret 3 that we don't use enough. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Great.
I'm going to add one more thing, Julie. When I was working on the book, I went back to an old friend of mine who was actually the managing partner of consulting for Ernst & Young at the time. And I said, Mac, here, read this draft. And he said, hey, Willie, cool stuff. So what? And I said, what do you mean, so what? He said, how do you use it? And that got me and my co-author, Jeannie Egmond from Northwestern at the time, into looking at how do you use it? And that came across as a sense-response cycle. Sense what's going on, make sense of what's going on, decide on a course of action, and then act on it. And to Julie's point, that cycle can run really slow, or it can run screamingly fast. And when it runs really, really fast, sometimes you don't have time to sit back and say, oh, I'll figure it out later, because somebody else is going to get there first. So that's the backdrop behind this whole thing.
And one of the things I really like about that sense response cycle in particular is that it is a framework for strategic thinking. As I look at the times I've been over the last decades myself in HR roles that were focused on succession planning and identifying leaders for the future, where we always got a little stuck is finding leaders that had that combination of being able to execute and being able to think bigger picture. And I think this prepared mind of a leader boils it down to skills, and your sense response cycle that we'll be kind of incorporating in all of our work really is the practical application for strategic thinking, which, again, you tell someone to be strategic, it's like, well, how do I do that? If it was, how? And to your point, so what? We need action. And everything that we've got in this work that we're doing has a nice practical application.
And back to Julie's piece about the world is changing faster than ever before, whether it's artificial intelligence, which is the fastest technology application ever, or whether it's geopolitical issues, who's our friends, who's our enemies, what's going on? And never mind. I don't want to get into politics, but it's messing up an awful lot of businesses.
Let's pass that one. Yeah,
So
we get it. Yeah, we get it.
The point is, for a leader in any organization, they've got to juggle all these balls. And one more thing, and then I'll pass it back to Julie and Jim. When I talk to young leaders, I basically say, look, imagine yourself juggling a bunch of black balls. Some of them are glass, some of them are rubber. If you drop a rubber one, you can pick it up on the fly and keep on juggling, but don't ever drop a glass ball because it's gone forever. And I think that's the challenge that an awful lot of managers and emerging leaders have these days, to try to figure out, of all the things I've got to do, what I can never drop this one. And so there we go.
I love that. The visual is really great and helpful. And I know for me too, my visual always was in these corporate jobs I've been in. I always felt like I was being shot out of a cannon and I was just flying through the air trying to get things done as I'm flying before I land, right? So it's like that visual. There's always so much going on. How do you sort out from everything that people are talking about right now, about leadership, about AI, where to put your time and attention? And again, narrowing to skills seems to be a way to make something that's very complex much easier and have wide application for businesses and for organizations. So no, that's great. Thank you, Bill. And the next thing I want to dive into to build on this is all building is that I want to have Jim talk a little bit about, as we got into this, Bill's bringing this deep experience in strategic thinking and prepared mind and all these topics. And then Jim is bringing his personal experience with thinking differently in a technology landscape and helping solve really hard problems. And one of the fun conversations we've been having has been around spatial thinking and how some people lean towards visual spatial, some people lean towards auditory sequential, which is what kind of traditionally we think of perhaps as left brain, right brain, right? So Jim, if you could talk a little bit about that, because I know you've been deep dive into the research and how this plays into thinking in ways that are going to help anticipate the future.
Yes, absolutely, Julie. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, I've got decades, more than 3 decades of experience coming up with very innovative solutions. And that were it was a simple, elegant solution that nobody could see, but seemed so obvious to me. And, in the future, I'll outline some of those specifically and give you the details. But what would happen is I would come up with a solution. It would seem so simple, so obvious. I would struggle getting people convinced it would work. Sometimes I could convince them to work. I sometimes just did it at nights and weekends myself to prove it could work. And I wanted to see if I could teach other people how to think like I do. And I've been working for almost 10 years trying to do that. And unfortunately, it just I could never get it to sustain. They would learn it in the project, and then they weren't able to continue repeating it over and over again. So I decided to research, how does my brain work? And I just started searching the internet. I started looking at this and looking at that, and I ran across the work of Dr. Linda Silverman. And starting in the late 80s, she started publishing and talking about, in her work with gifted children, some were very, very smart and talented as auditory sequential learners, which is very traditional school teaching.
Sure.
And some of her brightest gifted students who were failing school were sequential, visual spatial learners, but they were extremely bright and they would be solving the hardest problems and bypass all the easy ones. Sure. So the more I started digging up about her work and her writings, the more it described me, and I got really excited. As I dug more and more into it, I found out this has been known for over 40 years. There's research across a lot of people. This is how the human brain works. We all have both types of cognitive abilities. Unfortunately, what happens is the traditional education, especially when I grew up, is very centered towards working and leveraging only the auditory sequential thinking. Show your work, show the process.
Multiple choice questions, right?
Yes.
I mean, multiple choice.
Exactly.
I mean, there's one right answer. And
Yes, exactly.
list. I mean, it couldn't be any more sequential.
Yeah. And the corporate world is very similar to that. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that too. But if you think about it, the corporate world is very auditory sequential. Project plans, details, work from the bottom up, process. And therefore, all of us really get a lot of exercise on that part of our brain. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't get much opportunity in the corporate world or the technology world to exercise the visual spatial part of the brain. and that can atrophy. Now, I've been fortunate in the sense that I naturally use it a lot, and I like using it, and I gravitate towards there. But I struggle with translating the solution into the details. So it's interesting. Albert Einstein once said that all of his most important productive thinking was done by playing with images in his imagination. Only in a secondary stage did he translate with great effort these images into the language of words and mathematics that could be understood by others. And that's what it's like for me. The answer is so simple, it's there, but to tease it apart, to explain it to an auditory sequential person is really, really hard. It takes me much longer to do that.
Sure.
So the interesting thing is I started discovering this and researching this. Julie, who's been a long-term friend of mine. Oh, and by the way, I don't think I've ever stated this to Julie. I think you're one of the few people who are strong in visual, spatial, and auditory sequential. I really do. Yeah. Julie and I both worked at the same company, and I didn't do well, and she always does great.
Oh, oh thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. In fact, that reminds me of another story, and maybe Julie could even tie into this a little bit. It's going to surprise her because she doesn't know I'm bringing this up.
Hey, but we're live. That happened, right?
She came to me one day and she says, Jim, I'm once again the senior HR executive at a company, but this one's highly political. There's a lot of political maneuverings going on, and I'm just lost. It's just, I can't see it and understand it. So I talked to her about some recent learnings I did from Sun Tzu's Art of War, The Prince by Machiavelli, and over coffee we did that. About a month later, Julie completely grokked that whole concept, and we had coffee, and she goes, I'm seeing the dynamics. I'm seeing who's in power and the plays are doing it. I'm seeing who are the weak people and who are struggling. You are seeing things that weren't seen before. And that's what visual spatial is looking and seeing the things that nobody else can see. And it becomes so simple and to understand, but sometimes very hard to explain. So if you think, I don't know if that's visual spatial for you in that situation, but it really describes all of a sudden seeing that aha moment and having, oh, I get it. Now,
so much of the work that you found, I recall, is found more in the education system. So it's been focused up to this point really on kids as they're growing up and how kids learn. And I think the unique piece of this is, you know, you've been taking these ideas and pulling them into a work environment like we're talking about. And what I would describe, I mean, you know, you brought up that we absolutely, I mean, it was like you shared some insights and I was able to essentially put on a new pair of glasses about my organization and see things I hadn't seen before. And that's what it's like, I think, when you have you start to apply some of these skills and ideas to work situations, you do end up finding insights and solutions that just you were blind to previously, because that's what it had felt like for me. So no, that's a good example of how working on skills and new insights can make a meaningful difference. Absolutely.
But let me jump in for 1 second.
Yeah.
So 8 skills of the prepared mind. One of the skills is imagination.
That's right.
And for 20 years now, when I do workshops and I ask people, this was prior to COVID when I could actually be in a room with people, how many of you got a great imagination? And I'll get 2 or 3 hands go, and then I'll get 2 or 3 people kind of, yeah, maybe. And the rest of the people just stare at me. And then I say, I got a different question. You're 6 years old and a large appliance is delivered to your house or to your apartment. What became of the box? And they go crazy.
Yep.
No, it was a jail for my little brother. It was a spaceship. It was a fort. We had great imaginations as children. Yeah. And then school drove it out of us.
That's right.
I'm just reinforcing Jim's point and Julie's point on that. I'm back. Bye.
I know. This is great.
Okay.
Jump in. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And work continues to push it out to us. And Julie, you're right. A lot of the research was discovering that children learn in different ways depending upon their cognitive a predisposition now. It's kind of like left-handed versus
Sure.
right-handed. Unless there's a physical disability, no one is purely left-handed and the right arm just lays limp, or no one's so purely right-handed and the left arm lays down. You're using both. Now you may have a preference. And research done by Silverman says that about 45% of the population is roughly balanced in their abilities. A third are like me, where they just tend to really heavily use the spatial work. And the remaining quarter are naturally very strong sequential thinkers. But all of us have both capabilities. And the really cool thing is what I discovered is by sharing what I'm finding out with Bill, he goes, well, that can overlay nicely with my framework. He even asked me, Jim, is there now that you're talking about visual spatial, is there anything of these skills that we're missing? I could not find anything, because it just visual spatial and auditory linear just overlaid very nicely across those. And it said, okay, I can have more imagination if I start developing that cognitive ability. The other neat thing that's been shown in research is that we can actually, through certain techniques, actually reactivate our visual spatial thinking, and we can grow it. Now, we won't all become Einsteins, but like anything, if I exercise, I can become stronger, or I can be able to run further. It's the same thing with the brain. So there is so much interesting stuff that's going on. There's a book I'm reading by Thomas West. It says, Think Like Einstein, and he's referring to the importance of visual imaging for some of the most creative minds. Besides Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, you would visualize the entire solution before you started building anything. Michael Faraday was considered one of the greatest experimental scientists of his time, but he didn't use his experiments to come up with ideas. He had his idea and he used his experiments to prove or disprove the idea. He knew the solution beforehand. And so I don't know how we're doing on time here, but the really cool thing is we have these, we can develop them, and we can incorporate that to bring ourselves more cognitive agility and to be able to leverage insights from one to drive the other. I think, Julie, you mentioned some of the characteristics of sequential thinking versus spatial thinking, right? Sequential, it's an analytical approach, attends well to details, works through the problem in a step-by-step fashion, aligns well with order, process, and structure. Sounds like today's corporate world. Visual spatial thinking, however, is very different. It's very holistic and comprehensive in complex interactions and relationships. It can see patterns hiding in the chaos and oftentimes arrives at solutions all at once in a very intuitive way. That's why it's really hard to say, prove that you know this works, right?
Well, and it really applies nicely. You think about, I think we know visual spatial thought processes are just less commonly used in the workplace. They're just less common, unless you're in a field like creative advertising, graphic design. There's some areas for sure, but it's just less common. And, we're not saying that being a linear thinker, a sequential thinker is bad. I mean, we know that's needed, that will continue to be needed. I mean, even you think about AI does a lot of that and will confirm it's true and to make sure the right question's being asked in the first place, right? So there is definitely a place for that kind of thinking. But I think what we've identified is that visual spatial becomes the new frontier, is becomes more important and elevated in a way that it hasn't in the past. And so, so that's the other piece of it that I think we've been finding. And I'd love to hear a little bit about, as you're kind of thinking of these concepts, Jim, like why kind of building that muscle of visual spatial you think is so important for managers of the future.
Oh, sure. If I can improve my visual spatial cognitive abilities to complement my already growing or very strong auditory linear ones, I'm able to learn to think and actually adapt faster. I'm able to, cognitive be very flexible in how I look and view things. One nice thing about visual spatial, because it's so holistic, it actually can see the whole thing and all of the relationships and interactions. It's nearly impossible, the complexity of today's environment, to go from the bottoms up and to understand everything, but to go from the kind of the top down and see the interrelationships is very powerful. I'm trying to think. Uh, Here's a good example of combining visual spatial and auditory linear. A couple of years ago, I was in a project and we were going to, the challenge was how to prioritize healthcare claims that had failed auto adjudication.
Okay.
That's about a million a day.
Wow. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. It's about 300,000 a day. It's about
Still a
300,000 a
lot.
day. They do a
Yeah.
lot. They do a lot, right? Yeah. And that's only a 5% maybe, or 4%. But there's huge penalties related to being
Sure.
delayed more than 30 days. There's a lot of contracts. There's federal regulations, state
Sure.
regulations. And what's happening is a lot of the healthcare payers are paying big fines and
Sure.
penalties. So I got brought in because nobody could solve this problem. And I just kind of reflected on it and all of a sudden came up with a very simple way of combining artificial intelligence and traditional business
Okay.
rules. And we put it into a pilot. And the data showed we were very accurate for only predicting 1 and 2 days out.
Okay.
All the predictions beyond that were very inaccurate.
Okay.
The linear said, great idea, but it only works for this little piece. So then we just reshuffled and reappropriated the idea and say, okay, all we need to do is prioritize the next couple of days. The rest, as they get a little bit more mature in the background processes, we can understand and figure out when they work. And then that was piloted, and it was substantially better than human
Sure.
prioritizations and the previous ways of doing it. But that's where visual spatial and auditory linear or sequential can work together to make the solution much more effective.
Sure. Great example. Great example. No, that's excellent. And, I want to build further on this and share a little bit about how, as I've been, working on these ideas, both with Jim and Bill, and kind of out in the community, building my business, talking to people. I was in an association group that was mostly financial leaders, CFOs, that type of profile, controllers, that type of profile. And in this discussion, it was kind of a whole room discussion. The topic of AI came up, and the conversation very quickly went to concerns about relevance, like where a lot of fears about AI replacing a lot of financial processes, a lot of decision making. And what I really was struck is that there's this big gap right now between the technological changes that are happening and people's emotional readiness. And emotional intelligence is an area that I've done a lot of deep work. I've got some certifications. I've done a lot of leadership and executive training on that topic, and things like authentic leadership, which are all related to emotional intelligence. And I think fear is one of the biggest blocks to learning new skills, really. And one of the things, the problems that I think our prepared mind work can help solve is giving people some peace of mind and a focus for that fear. Technology is going to continue to change in ways that we can't even anticipate right now. Or maybe we can if we have a prepared mind. So I will take that back. If we have a prepared mind and following the sense response cycle, we will probably be able to anticipate some of it. But as an individual, no matter what changes in the world, if you are building your skills, learning and growing, and applying and pushing yourself to extend, to look at that, to put on a new pair of glasses, kind of like the example that with Jim shared. It's like, I had to put on a new pair of glasses to operate in a specific organization because of the political dynamics. It's like, I needed a new point of view. I needed a new way to operate in order to be successful in that organization. but there was a path. I had to try and test and learn and push myself to look at it in a different way. I just think that really hopefully will provide some peace of mind to aspiring leaders and current leaders that there's still a need for leadership. There's still a need for decisions to be made and for discernment when it comes to how we're building organizations and how to help organizations thrive. And I love the fact I look at prepared mind as both a mindset and a skill set. It's a little of both. Like, you have to be open to change yourself if you're going to step into this work and work your way through that. But I just think, again, and also as I was reflecting, middle management is, I think, oftentimes the people that are caught in the sandwich. They're directly managing teams, yet they're reporting up to senior leaders. And they really are the people that get the majority of the strategic work that's to be done is done by middle management. And I think there's a gap in investing in middle management many times. And so we are really looking at the prepared mind work as an investment in middle management, ideally, because that's where we really feel like there's the biggest opportunity for helping organizations elevate and expand their impact on their clients and on their communities. So, and then I'll also just point out, one of the things I love is, I look at the 8 prepared mind skills, and many of them are directly related to emotional intelligence, or the context of emotional intelligence makes a decision. Your emotional state when you make a decision for deciding makes a difference. Your emotional state when you're reflecting, and to the extent that you're reflecting on how your emotions impact what's happening around you. There's so many connections between these 8 prepared mind skills and emotional intelligence. So that is another piece too, that as we continue to build out our solutions, I'm excited to continue to explore that a little bit further. So yeah, jump in, Bill.
I'm going to jump in for a second.
I can tell you're thinking. I knew you were going to.
I want to tie into what Julie was just talking about. So I'm a Vietnam veteran, and therefore this past Tuesday was very special to me because it was Veterans Day.
Yes.
And in the Vietnam era, Admiral Stockdale was a prisoner for 7.5 years in what was generally referred to as the Hanoi Hilton. So he had 7.5 years of being tortured, beaten, and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
When he got out, one of the questions that was asked of him, and this goes to a mindset issue and part of Julie's issue of how do you think about this? He was asked, what differentiated the survivors from those who didn't survive?
Mm.
And his answer turned out to be something that's now referred to as the Stockdale paradox. The Stockdale paradox says you need to face the brutal facts.
Okay.
And on the other hand, you have to have total faith that you're going to survive. And it's not a question of being an optimist. He says, the guys who thought, we'll be freed by Christmas, when Christmas came and went, they gave up. He said it was the people who were the realists on this one. So in today's current environment, and I've got nieces and nephews that are, they're wondering what's going on with all this thing with artificial intelligence and the speed of change and everything. Well, those are the brutal facts. But if you have the right mindset, you're going to survive. And so there's the piece that's out there. I think the Stockdale paradox fits in swimmingly with a lot of the things that are today's reality and things that we're talking about.
Absolutely. No, thank you for your service. And that's a great example. I mean, we are talking to people, I think, in the corporate world right now do feel a little bit like it's survival right now. Right. I mean, there is a little bit of that, what's going to happen? How is my job going to change? So there is that fear. It does exist. And going into situations with more confidence, and confidence that comes from real substance, like skills, can make a meaningful difference for people. So, yeah. So we are kind of reaching the end here, and I wanted to make sure before we talk a little bit about our vision for the Prepared Mind Project. Any other stories, any other examples that I missed, or things that you think are helpful for people to be hearing about the Prepared Mind Project right now?
Yeah, Julie, there's one. Talking about how fast things are changing and how much data is coming our way, and I think that's where enhancing our visual spatial cognitive abilities really helps in this space. About a year ago, I was asked to get involved in my very first AI related project, and that was to validate how to modernize legacy software, these big mainframe programs, very complex. There's a lot of large teams at Google, AWS, Microsoft, Cognizant, all been working on these things for years. They're doing some really cool stuff, but their solution didn't make sense to the visual spatial mind.
Okay.
It seemed overly complicated. It seemed overly complex, and the modernization process would take years. So here I am coming in cold on AI, and in a month, I had a much better approach that made sense to my brain, and it was completely different from what they were doing. And 2 months later, I actually had gone through a software program, more than 1 million lines of code, and completely converted it and modernized it through this approach by just 3 people.
Wow, amazing.
Very small team, very short work. Right. And so the ability to quickly understand things, to be able to see the opportunities, to be able to discern which way they are, comes very strongly from that visual spatial intelligence. And so increasing that a little bit makes the world seem to be much slower and much easier to be able to completely grok.
Great. No, that's great insights and great experience. I like that you showed your journey kind of on how that built over time. It wasn't like you walked in and got it. Like it was a process, right? Like we all have learned, like we're all learning. And it's like this is and that giving yourself permission to test and learn, I think is part of the key of all this. It's like, you're not going to walk in and have perfectly honed skills day one. We're all working on that, and AI is an acquired taste, if you will. Like it's something that you were able to then leverage into better solutions, which is great. How about you, Bill?
I was going to tie a story onto Jim's story. For those of the people who are online, they know me. I'm a storyteller. And it a little bit is on this visual spatial thing. It goes all the way back to my very first job, which was in the Marine Corps. And I was in Vietnam, and I was really angry that a unit was being moved away from where I was positioned. And I went to the colonel and I said, "Colonel, what the hell are you doing? You've put me in jeopardy." And he said, "Hold on, son, come here." And he was patient at that time. We went to a big map, and he said, "Now I want you to look at the big picture." And then he explained why he was doing what he was doing.
Okay.
And boy, did it make sense.
Sure.
So I think part of this whole issue is on the visual spatial, it's a lot of it is understanding the big picture as to what's going on and not just your little piece of it. So that would be my 2 cents.
I love that. I love that.
And the only other thing I want to just jump in on real quick as I've been watching the chat. Becky, thank you for your comment.
Yes,
and Sheila, thank you for your additions.
Yes, I just pulled up those as well. I didn't want to miss out. So Krishna says hello. And hello, Krishna. We appreciate you weighing in. And Becky, great to see that you're out there listening. Appreciate you as well. Thanks for your comment in support of Bill. So, and then Sheila, love that you're out there. And Sheila also has a lot of passion around organizational development, leadership development. And again, Sheila, thanks for your comments. She said it's a great service to new leaders and middle managers to strengthen those 8 skills and their emotional intelligence. I appreciate the visibility you're bringing to mindsets and skill sets and how it intersects with emotional intelligence and individual and organizational well-being and effectiveness. So thank you, Sheila. Thanks for for making a comment and being with us today. We appreciate it. So with this, then I wanted to talk about, so we've, given you a bunch of teasers on the Prepared Mind Project. And I'd love for each of us will take a turn at talking about, what our vision for the Prepared Mind Project, kind of what we feel like is coming and kind of what we're excited about. So I guess, Jim, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I'm excited, as we continue to develop the content for you to work with. I'm excited about managers or even any kind of thought leader improving their problem-solving capabilities, enhancing their decision-making, being more cognitively flexible, improved understanding, and really much more options with the career. And then at the organization, middle managers become a bridge and not the barrier. That's what I've seen a lot.
Great.
And they can also then instigate teams to be more innovative because they can plant that innovative seed. It allows organizations to start thinking as systems and at scale. And I believe we're going to see the results because they're going to have competitive advantage because the environments are more and more complex. And I think this is the tool that will allow that to work. So that's what I'm excited about.
That's great. No, I like the bridge, not the barrier. That to me, that was kind of like mic drop quote. Like, yeah, okay. So, and a quick shout out to Bruce. Bruce, great to have you here today. And I know these are topics that are near and dear to your heart as well. So good to have you listening in today as well. So Bill, gonna turn it over to you next. So kind of what are you excited about? What are you hoping this is going to do, the work we do together?
Well, I'll just be kind of straight to the point on this one. I really, really want to try and help some emerging leaders. And I'm not going to go with age on this one because some emerging leaders are my age. But I really want to try to help emerging leaders deal with this wicked world in which we live. And I'm using wicked in the sense of the systems thinking piece. It's complex. When you try to fix something and you end up breaking something, everything is interdependent. But we need good leaders. And I think that we need people who can think and act. And I'll just tie this back really quickly to the sense response cycle. Sensing and making sense are kind of thinking skills. That's almost an academic thing.
Sure.
Deciding and acting are the heart of leadership, because it doesn't make any difference how smart you are. It's going to be dependent upon the decisions you make and how well you can implement them. So I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully, years from now, some young buck will turn around and say, "Boy, you guys made a difference." So there's that.
That's right. Thank you, Bill. That's the great insights. Your focus on emerging leaders, I think that's well said. And I think we all would love to help people build their careers in a way that's meaningful and where leaders feel better prepared. So many leaders just get thrown into leadership without any additional support. And I think there are ways we can help make leaders more successful more quickly with less pain. So definitely. So I'll build on all of this. So I agree 100% with what Jim and Bill have both said. And, I'll just add another angle to it as well. Like of course, I have a big heart for HR leaders. I've been in their shoes. I understand what it's like to be in that HR seat and how committed HR leaders are to developing leaders internally. I've been behind the scenes and I've done that work myself and worked with so many leaders that, want to create really strong internal career paths for people. And this work that we're doing fills in a gap that I wish I had had. So I wish I had had a resource. And again, we're kind of going between, there's a lot of theoretical leadership. Like you said, Bill, there's like almost academic leadership ideas. And then I think there's very basic execution related leadership ideas. I think we're filling in an important middle ground that's backed by science, that has form and substance and that you can actually go do. So, and that opens doors into new solutions and impact for these leaders. So I think that's one of the things as we've been talking that I am most excited about is getting these concepts out in the world. And getting these in front of people. I think there are things that they can certainly, some people be able to pick up these ideas and do something with it themselves. But for those that want additional assistance, we're looking to create a lot of training related solutions. So, masterminds and short terms, kind of coming in and talking to groups, keynotes. We're looking to kind of cover the whole spectrum of leadership development and showing up to help organizations where they're at and fill in a very important gap. So for me, I want this to be a great resource for HR and it'll fill in a gap that I don't know what fills that gap today necessarily within organizations. So we're stepping into something I wish I had had. So, so the past me would have loved this. So with that, one of the things you can be looking for is all three of us in different ways, shapes, or forms are going to start doing more publishing on this idea. So I have a biweekly newsletter. My next newsletter is going to be on this topic. As part of that, we will be giving away, all of us will have the ability to give away a handout that talks about the 8 prepared mind skills. So you have something that you can kind of look at and reflect yourselves. So all of this will be kind of live and ready to go next week as we head into Thanksgiving. But this is just the beginning. This was kind of the start. We've been talking about this for so long. We just needed to get it out into the world. So I really appreciate everyone that has participated today, that's listened in. I appreciate Jim and Bill for going along with my let's go live idea. So thank you. You guys were great. So thank you for doing this. And I'm sure we'll do it again. So you can certainly follow each of us on LinkedIn. My Thiel Talent Strategy is also out there to follow. Either the Thiel Talent Strategy will also have this video on my YouTube channel. So look for that as well. And just stay tuned for additional resources and events. So much, much more to come. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Bill. Thank you to those of you that listen.
Thank you, Julie.
I'll be putting a lot of these mini videos into social media here soon. So more to come. So thank you.